Hello, everyone, and welcome to Right Wing Rising. Please be sure to like this video down below before you are finished watching, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So, Election Day is fast approaching. I've talked about the governor elections, I've talked about the Senate elections. Before I talk about the presidency or the House elections, I want to talk about the other important elections happening at the state level this November that people need to pay attention to, need to get out and vote for. So I am going to give an overview of races for different offices at the state government level taking place all over the country and other important elections down ballot as well. To start off, I want to look at the Attorney General races taking place on Election Day. 10 states will be electing a new Attorney General. Montana, Utah, Missouri, and West Virginia are going to vote heavily Republican for this office, and Vermont will retain their Democrat Attorney General. In Washington, Democrats are very likely to win that race, but much like the election for the governorship this year, I think it could be around 10 points. The Republican nominee for AG did very well all across the state, even in the suburban and urban areas in the primary. So there is an outside chance he gets 45% of the vote and makes this a 10-point contest. Either way, it's all but certain to go Democrat, but it could be closer. As for Oregon, or as I like to lovingly call it, Oregon, this could actually be an interesting race. Since this is an open race with no incumbent, there has been only one poll of this race, a Democrat internal poll, that showed the Republican nominee only a handful of points behind the Democrat nominee. I think it could get a lot closer. The current Attorney General won that race in 2020 by about 15 points. I think Democrats will win it this time by less than 10 points. I'm predicting around an 8 to 9 point victory. So Republicans could gain a lot of ground in that election. Over in Indiana, I expect Republicans to hold on here, but it's going to be interesting because I think it will be the closest statewide race taking place in the Hoosier State this fall. Todd Rokita, the incumbent Attorney General, is running for re-election, and even though he won handily in 2020, he has received a lot of negative coverage from the media for going after an abortion doctor. Despite Democrats trying to use their favorite issue against him, I don't think it's going to work. I think he's going to win by around 10 points and hold on. In North Carolina, Republicans have not won this office in the state in eons. But I think this might finally be the year, even though the polls are close. And the Democrat nominee, current Congressman Jeff Jackson, is leading in the majority of them. I think that the GOP nominee, current Congressman Dan Bishop, is going to pull it out narrowly, under a point, and pick off this office for the Republicans after many years of trying. And I think the GOP is going to flip another Attorney General office in Pennsylvania, again, very narrowly. But the Republican nominee there is doing pretty well in polling, and Republicans have shown an inclination to do very well in down-ballot offices during presidential years, usually even outperforming the top of the ticket. So I feel that there is a very good chance for Republicans this cycle to flip the Attorney General offices in Pennsylvania and North Carolina. Now moving over to the Secretary of State offices that are up for election this year, Washington and Vermont are going to stay heavily Democrat, and Montana and West Virginia are going to easily maintain control of that office in those states. The Oregon Secretary of State election is another example from the state this cycle where the polling is not looking as good for Democrats as you would expect. I'm still going to put this in the likely Democrat column, given the lean of the state, but I really think, like the Attorney General race in the state, this election has a chance to surprise people with how well Republicans do and how close they make it. Over in Missouri, Republicans should easily hold on, but I think it will be by less than 15 points. There is no incumbent Secretary of State, although the state senator, Denny Hoskins, is a terrific nominee for Republicans here. He will make a great Secretary of State, But as the non-incumbent, I think he will win by just under 15 points and underperform Trump by 2 to 3 points. In North Carolina, another office Democrats have held for a long time. For some reason, voters in the state like to vote Republican at the top of the ticket, but vote Democrat down ballot. However, even though the incumbent is running in this race, a lot of things are looking good here for Republicans in the Tar Heel state. I think they're going to flip it, once again, like the Attorney General race, very narrowly into their column, but I think they're going to win it all the same. So only 7 states are electing new Secretary of States this year, but I think Republicans are going to win 4 out of the 7 and flip North Carolina into their column. For state treasurer, we see that 10 states are electing new state treasurers. North Dakota, Utah, Arkansas, and West Virginia are going to go safe Republican. The opposite is true for Washington and Vermont, once again. And I'm going to run through these very quickly because the circumstances behind these races are very similar to the ones for Attorney General and Secretary of State we've talked about. Namely, in Oregon, another race showing Democrats with a smaller than normal lead. In Missouri, I think it's going to be around 15 points. A new state treasurer was appointed since the last election in 2020. So even though he's the incumbent, he's never faced election before, so I'm going to put him a little less than 15 points. In North Carolina, I expect Republicans to hold on there. They are currently in control of that office, but the incumbent state treasurer is not running for re-election. The polling looks pretty tight, but I'm going to default to Republicans winning, especially during a presidential year where Trump seems to be doing well in the state, even though Harris is making a big play for it. And given how good the early vote numbers look for Republicans, I think they are also going to flip the state auditor race further down the ballot, which Democrats control as of now, and hold on to other statewide offices, such as the Superintendent for Public Instruction. Additionally, in North Carolina, there is actually one state Supreme Court seat up for re-election, one that Democrats hold. Republicans currently maintain a 5-2 majority on that court. After gaining 2 seats in the midterms, look for them to gain one more seat this time to amass a dominant 6-1 majority on the state high court. The last state holding election for a state treasurer is Pennsylvania. Republicans hold that office. They flipped it in 2020. The incumbent is running again, and I think she's going to win by somewhere around 2 to 3 points. Republicans also control the state auditor position. The incumbent is running, and I think he will win by a couple points to another term. And that's why I'm bullish on Republicans' chances to flip the Attorney General seat in the state, because even in 2020, not a good political environment for Republicans nationwide. Trump lost the state at the top of the ticket. Republicans still did well down ballot and won 2 statewide offices. Especially with Trump doing better in the state and hopefully poised to flip it, I think Republicans should be able to continue doing well and doing better down ballot and carry that over to maintaining the treasurer and auditor offices as well as gaining the Attorney General seat. So Republicans look to be in good shape to hold all 7 treasurer seats they currently control that are up for election this year. Before we move on, I know I also mentioned about a state Supreme Court election in North Carolina. 3 other states of note are holding interesting Supreme Court elections. 2 state Supreme Court elections are up in Michigan, one that Republicans currently hold, the other one Democrats currently hold. If Democrats win both of them, they would expand their majority to a 5-2 edge. But if Republicans win both of them, they would turn the current 4-3 Democrat majority into a 4-3 conservative majority. So that would be a big result. In Ohio, 2 Supreme Court seats held by liberal justices are up for election. With Trump on the ballot, Republicans have a good shot to flip them and expand their razor-thin 4-3 majority to a 6-1 majority, which would be a very good thing for the state. And finally, in Montana, another state with 2 state Supreme Court elections that carry a lot of weight. Both races are seats that currently are held by liberal judges, but neither of them are running for re-election. If Republicans gain both of them, they can flip the court to a conservative majority. The conservative governor, Greg Gianforte, is poised to win big in his re-election bid, and he has endorsed and is supporting the conservative candidates in those races. So that would be an underratedly big pickup for Republicans. The second to last set of elections that I want to talk about in this video are the abortion referendums taking place in 10 states across the country. Unfortunately, in New York and Maryland, pro-abortion referendums will pass and make their way into law. Those states are just too Democrat. Colorado also has such a measure on the ballot. It needs 55% of the vote to pass, so I think it's not necessarily guaranteed. There's a world where somehow it gets less than 55% of the vote, but it's still very likely that it unfortunately does pass there. And also in Arizona and Nevada, it's likely those measures that are on the ballots in both those swing states pass. The polling has not looked good for the pro-life side of things in those states. They don't seem to be the most socially conservative states out there. Montana also has one on the ballot, and considering that a measure in the midterms failed that would have protected the life of a child born alive after a botched abortion, I don't have much optimism for this pro-abortion ballot measure to fail. I think it has more of a shot to fail than in some of these states down in the Southwest, but I think it's still leaning more in that direction, just like it is, sadly, in Missouri. Even though this is a very conservative state, Republicans regularly win here by around 20 points, and it's currently one of the states that has banned abortion. It looks like that ban could be overturned by this amendment passing. About 15 to 20% of Trump voters would have to turn around and vote for abortion on the ballot, which is a pretty big number. So there is an outside chance that the pro-life movement is able to defeat the abortion movement in this state, but the polls aren't looking great. It's going to be close either way, but I think unfortunately it's leaning in favor of the pro-choice movement. However, positively, I think Republicans are going to defeat the abortion measure in South Dakota. Just based on the political lean of the state, I think Republicans should have enough people opposing it, and there was a poll put out recently that had the amendment being defeated, even if narrowly. And in Nebraska, really interestingly, they have one pro-abortion measure and they have one pro-life measure. It's kind of conflicting ballot referendums. But according to polling and some things I'm seeing, it looks like the pro-life amendment will beat out the pro-abortion one. This is really a toss-up, but I think it's leaning toward the conservative direction, which would be an absolutely huge win in that state. And lastly, in Florida, perhaps biggest of all, the radical pro-abortion amendment on the ballot needs 60% of the vote to pass. And given that Trump has come out and said he's not voting for it, he doesn't support it, DeSantis and Republicans in the state have put a lot of effort behind defeating it, and more recent polls have actually gotten better for the pro-life movement in this election. I think Republicans are going to be able to defeat that amendment. So even though it's disheartening for pro-lifers to hear that they are probably going to lose in 7 of the 10 ballot states, winning the fight for life in 3 states would still be a huge development after the movement has really struggled electorally and in these referendums ever since Roe v. Wade was overturned. And now finally, we have to take a look at the state legislative elections taking place around the country, and we'll start by looking at the state Senate elections. I've taken the liberty of filling out the states where there is no pathway to a majority in the chamber by the minority party. You might be surprised to see states like Wisconsin, Texas, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina as safe Republican, but they have very large majorities there, and there are not enough competitive seats for Democrats to be able to challenge them. Looking at the 6 states where the battle for state Senate control is raging, we first can move Nevada and Alaska into the likely Democrat column. There is a pathway for Republicans to gain the majority in Nevada on a very good night if they have very good turnout, but it's still the Democrats' race to lose. And Alaska, they have a very weird bipartisan coalition that by nature in its policy leans more Democrat and also in the makeup of its members. It's really hard to predict what's going on there because no one really seems to know. So as of right now, I'm going to assume it stays in Democrat hands. And by Democrat hands, I mean in the hands of the bipartisan coalition. Because at least in my mind, if you don't have a majority where conservative legislation can be passed, even moderate conservative legislation, then it is a Democrat majority, one where Republicans cannot get much accomplished. As for the 4 other states, Arizona is one that Republicans are in danger of losing their majority there. They only hold a 16-14 razor-thin edge. Looking at the map, though, given how well Republicans are doing in early voting, with Trump up big in the polls and heavily favored to take back the state, I'm going to go with my gut and say Republicans are narrowly going to hold on in Arizona and keep that majority. And the same thing goes for Pennsylvania. Their majority is a little bit bigger, a 28-22 advantage, but there are more competitive seats that Democrats have a chance to flip, and that would give them a pathway to erasing the GOP advantage. But again, in a presidential year, Republicans have been doing better in early voting than they did in 2020 or even 2022, and I think those factors are going to help Republicans keep control in the upper chamber. Also in New Hampshire, Republicans are going to be able to maintain their majority there. They have a 14-10 majority. Democrats only need to flip 2 seats to bring it to a tied chamber. But at the very minimum, I think Republicans will be able to keep control of one of the 2 seats that Democrats are targeting to gain in order to flip the majority. Lastly, in Maine, another state, like in Nevada, that Republicans have a plausible pathway to the majority. And at the very least, I think they will pick up 1 or 2 Senate seats. If Trump and other Republicans in the state have a good night, Republican voters get out and vote in droves in the state, there is a reality where Republicans narrowly pick off the state Senate majority. As of right now, though, I'm saying it's still leaning towards Democrats, but definitely one to keep an eye on at the state legislative level. And last but not least, we have to look at these state house elections. Again, I have filled out all of these states where the minority party has no path to the majority, and we can see that there are about twice as many competitive battles for the majority in different state houses across the country. Georgia and Florida are still safe for Republicans. Democrats would have to make huge gains in order to flip those majorities. Also, a side note, Republicans have the majority comfortably in Kansas, but they're looking to keep their supermajority so that they still have the option to override the veto of the Democrat governor on conservative legislation. And they only have the supermajority by about 2 to 3 seats. Getting the likely states out of the way, North Carolina is going to be likely Republican. Democrats do technically have a pathway on a really, really good night for them to pick it off, but that would require them picking up almost 20 seats. And in a presidential year, where the early vote results and polling are looking good for Republicans, that seems very doubtful. Also for the state house, Nevada is once again likely for the Democrats to hold on to, and the same goes for Oregon. The GOP does have a pathway to the majority in both states on a good night. In fact, Oregon might actually be more plausible than Nevada, since Republicans would only need to pick up 5 seats in that northwestern state. I'm also putting Alaska, much as I did for the state Senate in this state, in the likely Democrat column, since I am assuming that the bipartisan coalition retains majority of the chamber. In Texas, Republicans are likely also to maintain their majority in that chamber. There are a number of seats Democrats could flip to gain the majority. It would have to be about 10 or so. So there is a possibility Democrats pick up some seats, but Republicans could as well. And anticipating that Trump is actually going to improve in this state from 2020, I don't think Republicans are in any danger here. Also in Arizona, much like in the state Senate, it's a coin toss. They have a 31-29 seat majority, but once again, a lot of good things to like for Republicans in this state, so I think they're going to narrowly hold on to their majority in the lower chamber. Moving up north, Republicans have plenty of seats to choose from in the state of Minnesota. where they can find the 4 seats necessary to flip that lower chamber into their column, which would be absolutely huge for the balance of power in that state, since Democrats control all other parts of the state government. However, as of now, it's not looking super promising, but if Trump can make the state within 5 points, and perhaps even as good as his 2016 margin of a 2-point race, you really could see Republicans potentially pick that chamber off in a huge upset. But right now, I think it's narrowly leaning towards the Democrats, but not necessarily out of reach for Republicans. In Wisconsin, they have a large House majority, but after recent redistricting, the map has become much less favorable for them, and Democrats have a very real chance to gain the majority. However, looking at recent metrics, polling, and just anticipating Trump to improve upon his 2020 margin, I think Republicans are in a decent position to still hold their majority in the House, even if more narrowly than they are used to. And in Michigan, I am expecting Republicans to flip back control of the state house after they narrowly lost it in the midterms. Democrats only have a 56 to 54 majority. Republicans need 2 seats. I think they can do it with Trump on the top of the ticket. The governorship went blue at the top of the ticket in the midterms by 10 points. Trump has a chance to win the state. That means the top of the ticket is going to get much redder, which should help Republicans over the finish line and get that majority back in the state of Michigan. And I think the same thing is going to happen in Pennsylvania. Another state house majority Republicans lost in the midterms due to a disastrous performance by the GOP at the governorship level there. They need 1 single seat to flip the majority back, with Democrats currently holding a 102 to 101 edge. And I think with Trump at the top of the ticket, he's very well liked in the state of Pennsylvania. He does well there. I think he's going to have the down ballot effect of giving the chamber back to Republicans, gifting them, once again, total control of the state legislature. Republicans have the narrowest majority in the state house of really any state they control. And given that there are 400 state house districts in New Hampshire, it's really hard to accurately predict with that many races, particularly many of them being competitive, who's going to win. But as of right now, I'm going to yield to saying the Republicans narrowly hold on to control the state house. And once again, lastly, looking at Maine, just like for the state Senate in this state, it quietly has a chance to, out of nowhere, flip into Republican control. Once again, though, I'm leaving it as lean Democrat right now. If Trump makes the state close at the top of the ticket, like he did in 2016, I think there's a real shot that Republicans can gain the roughly 10 seats they need to gain in order to take control of the lower chamber in the state. To recap the state legislative races, Republicans and Democrats look to hold all of their current majorities in the state Senate, but in the state House, look for Republicans to flip back control of the lower chamber in Michigan and Pennsylvania. So there you have it, an extensive look of all the important elections happening at the state government level, from Attorney General to Secretary of State, Treasurer, Auditor, Supreme Court, state legislative, and even a look at the abortion referendums, unfortunately, taking place in 10 states. Since so much emphasis is put on the presidency and Congress and the governorships, that down ballot offices are just as important, if not sometimes more important, in setting the policy, passing rules, laws, and regulations into place that affect our daily lives and the governance of the states we live in. So we need to make sure to pay attention to those as well. Thank you for watching this video. Once again, please be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and leave your thoughts in the comments down below. And most importantly, this election day, this coming week, get out and vote.